With our past stories, if there are stories of shame or fear or things that happen to you that are stories of discomfort, stories of that you're just not okay with, stories that are not a foundation of support, but things that you haven't found peace with, that's where the reframing techniques come in. That's where I can teach you how to reframe and coach you if needed through that reframing so that you can get to a place where those past stories are something that builds you. They're a foundation for you to actually reach self-actualization, which, if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, our first needs are water, food, shelter, sex, connection. The one at the very top, when you get to the top of the pyramid, is self-actualization. That's where you are striving to be all that you were meant to be and all that you can be. But in order to get to a place where you're striving for that, these other levels have to be figured out and have to be taken care of. And without having peace with your story, without being able to accept your past story, you're not fully in acceptance of yourself. And without truly loving yourself, you can't be to a place where you reach that self-actualization of where you're ready to be whole and ready to give back. And that comes from loving your story. So there is the past, there are the stories that we're telling in the present, which the more that I have studied and worked with personal narrative, the more I realize the intense power of the stories that we tell ourselves right now. The stories in your head that you're creating about the person that you're with, about the situation that you're in, about what's going on, what they're thinking about you, what you're thinking about them, how this is really going to play out. It's something that we do completely all of the time. But the powerful thing about it is it's also the thing that creates our reality. So we create our reality by the stories we're telling ourselves all the time. Coming to realize that and coming to manage it and coming to the space where you're able to take a step back and know when you're creating stories that are not based on fact, they're based on imagination and fear. Understanding how to manage those stories in the present creates an entirely different power in how you live your story. And then we have the stories of the future. And that's where my 21-day challenge comes in. That is being actively engaged every day in using what we call in the podcast, I call them story tools. They are story tools or life hacks or just techniques that are not bizarre or new, but when they're used, they create possibility. When they're used, they create connection. When they're used, they create a vulnerability and an openness and a realness in your life that takes you places that you couldn't go otherwise. And the 21-day challenge gives you a structured way to test out 21 of these life hacks so that you are building on purpose the life that you want in the future. And all of these are about the control that you have over your story. So the Love Your Story podcast is a discussion with professionals, life coaches, therapists, people who can share the things that they know about creating your life story on purpose. But it's also about people's life stories that have done magnificent things. I've got Olympians that I interview, and the Higginbotham twins who paddleboarded from Alaska to Mexico. Really intense, wonderful people who have taken on huge challenges, and they share with us how they did them. They share the story and the things that they needed to do, the characteristics that they needed in order to be able to do that. Interviews with people who have had huge tragedies and how they overcame those, how they made it through the hard times. So you're learning and growing through listening to other people's stories and how they did that. And then we also talk about those story tools, the life hacks in detail. Some of the episodes are completely content created where I share research and open conversations about things like love and forgiveness and random acts of kindness and persistence and vulnerability and these things that allow us to create our stories on purpose. So when I think about Love Your Story and what I'm trying to do with it, it's for everybody because we're all personal, because we all create stories, because we all want that kind of power. But it's also really for the badass heroes out there who have gone through really hard things, who have gone through the real challenges that have ripped their hearts out, that have brought them to their knees, that have made them wonder if they wanted to be here, and that are dealing with shame and difficulty and regret, the people who need to work with their stories. In my perspective is that the people who are given those kind of challenges are the people who are strongest, are the people who can handle them, and are the people who become the most beautiful because they're the ones who learn how to do it. So Love Your Story is for the seekers. It's for the people who want to learn and overcome and grow and figure out, how do I take my life challenges? How do I take this tough stuff that happened? How do I take the things that came about that I didn't expect? And how do I deal with them and find the meaning and purpose behind them so that I can live my best life story and not live in a place of fear or shame or regret? Love Your Story is about taking control of your story.